It was 5 in the morning before Daniel finally crashed. Nearly 50 rounds of tower assault had gone by, with the older and likely much more experienced Keeper Jackson and Miss Sue consistently beating the living daylights out of Daniel and Keeper Rivera, who complained appropriately. Miss Sue had changed his bloodied pillow and sheets for him, and he'd changed into the softest pair of pajamas he owned. Anything and everything with blood on it had gone straight into the washing machine and out of sight. Sometime around 3 a.m., Jackson and Miss Sue had taken a couple of rounds off to make pancakes for everyone. Daniel let Rivera win until the keeper called him out on it, at which point he proceeded to clean house mercilessly. Daniel even eventually found himself capable of laughing. Tower assault was good for that. No guns, no blood, just hurling giant rocks at castles with trebuchets. As far as modern gaming went, it was far behind the curve, but at least it was fun. Daniel leaned back on his bed, intending to only rest his burning eyes for a moment, and found himself, some time later, tucked into bed with afternoon sunlight drifting hazy through his window. Someone had dragged one of the armchairs into Daniel's bedroom, and Keeper Rivera was now sitting in it, thumbing through his phone with a bored expression. "What time is it?" Daniel asked, sitting up slowly. His head stuck to the pillow for a moment, the instant bandage pinching his skin. His whole head ached, and he had a monstrous crick in his neck. Rivera looked up at him, then glanced down at his phone again. 1:30, he answered. "Shit," said Daniel, throwing the covers off of himself. "I'm late. Why didn't anybody wake me up?" He glanced resentfully at the security camera, hoping the hollow butler understood reproach as a facial expression. "And why are you still here?" Rivera shrugged, putting his phone in his breast pocket. "Call it professional integrity. I wanted to make sure there was somebody here in case you woke up with questions." Daniel bundled some clothes together and scurried towards the shower. "Appreciate it, but I think I'm good," he said. He ducked into the bathroom, shut the door, and undressed as quickly as he could. Late or not, he could not go to work with that sticky crap all over the back of his head. He leapt into the shower, not even waiting for it to warm up. The water stung his wrists and cheek, and, a little later, the back of his head. Soap was going to be hell, he just knew it. There was a gentle knock at the door. "Mr. Rodriguez? I'm leaving my card on your coffee table. If you think of anything else, or if you need anything, don't hesitate to call, all right?" "Okay," Daniel called back. He wondered if Keeper Rivera could see the glow from his blush under the door. "I'm heading out," Rivera continued. "Unless you'd like me to stay?" "No, it's fine," Daniel cried, trying not to let his voice squeak. It was probably a good thing that the shower was so cold. It might keep him from spontaneously combusting from the embarrassed heat under his skin. At least the instant bandage was dissolving quickly. "All right. Goodbye, Mr. Rodriguez." There was a certain amount of relief that came with the keeper's exit, but also a nervousness, as though Daniel had taken off a bulletproof vest. And, he had to admit, disappointment. "Shut the fuck up, Daniel," he told himself. "You're taken anyway." He paused a moment, staring at the shower wall. "At least, probably," he admitted. It was nearly 1:30 by the time he finally made it to the NDC, hair damp and clinging close to his head, clothes rumpled, head aching fit to burst. His left arm was still sore as hell, and his wrists twinged every time he moved his hands. He hadn't even paused to get breakfast, which he knew he would regret, but he really just did not have the time. Angie's eyes almost bugged out of her head when she saw him. "Daniel?" she said. "Lord have mercy, what happened?" Daniel shook his head, waving a hand vaguely. I fell down the stairs, it's nothing." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't comment any further. He almost passed out when the elevator started slowing around floor 30. He found himself dizzy, with sparks clouding his vision, and his headache was like a pickaxe in the back of his head. He had to take a moment to let his vision clear before he could step out of the elevator, which of course gave Brian ample time to turn around and see him. "Daniel!" he cried, half rising out of his chair. "Holy shit, dude, what happened?" "I fell down the stairs," Daniel repeated robotically, not pausing on his way to his desk, acutely aware of the uncomfortably large number of eyes on him, the slow motions of people pulling one earbud out. Brian's voice carried unpleasantly well. "Like hell you did. You don't even have stairs. And what the fuck happened to your wrists? Dude, are you okay?" "Fuck off, Brian. I don't want to talk about it." "Shit, dude," Brian said, and subsided back into his chair. Everyone was suddenly very busy. He'd barely made it to his desk when Suzanne King's door opened. "Rodriguez?" she snapped. "Get in here." Daniel rolled his eyes, sighing, and made his way to Suzanne King's office. She looked him up and down critically. "Christ, Rodriguez, you look like you got hit by a train." "I fell down the stairs," he said. "Whatever makes you happy." She stood aside, letting him into her office. There were 2 women in black suits seated inside, one behind the desk and one in a folding chair nestled into the corner. "These are the health and safety investigators. They'll be taking your statement about what happened Monday. Try to go easy on me, all right, Rodriguez?" Then she stepped out of her office, closing the door behind her. "Have a seat, Mr. Rodriguez," one of the women said, indicating the rolling office chair nailed to the floor in front of Suzanne King's desk. There was something profoundly unsettling about seeing anyone other than Suzanne King on the other side of that little block of wood. He also didn't like that the other one was looking at the back of his head. It made his neck tingle and the injury back there throb. "My name is Dr. Georges, and this is Mrs. Sheng." She indicated the woman behind Daniel. "She's here primarily to observe and take notes. I'll be conducting the investigation." Okay," said Daniel. Dr. Georges put out an unsettling vibe. It was something about her completely unwavering gaze, the way she stared directly at Daniel's eyes no matter where he looked or how he fidgeted. There was something completely inescapable about her. "So," she said, businesslike, "can you tell us, in your own words, the events of March 28th? Sure," said Daniel. Between Dr. George's eyes boring into the front of his head and Mrs. Sheng's drilling a hole through the back, he felt like his skull was going to split in 2 at any second. "I got here around 9:30 or so, pretty usual, and Miss King told me right away that I'd have to go back down into the main bank, I mean." He paused and glanced up at Dr. Georges. She was still staring at him, her eyes like 2 green lasers. He looked away again. "There was this problem with one of the drives. It was making the whole west sector pour down rain every Tuesday. Except when I tried to fix it at first, apparently it just ended up making it hail every Friday, so I had to go fix it again." "Are you often asked to do work of this nature?" Dr. Georges asked pointedly. "Yes," Daniel replied, but before he could add any qualifying statements, she cut him off. "But you are, in fact, a software engineer, that is correct?" "Yes, but—" "You were not hired in the capacity of computer engineering?" "No, but—" "So why, Mr. Rodriguez, were you sent to the main bank for, evidently, a hardware problem?" Daniel took a deep breath. "The main bank's software is only accessible in situ. It's a security measure to keep anybody from being able to hack it. No off-site connections means no backdoor entrances. The main bank is too important to leave anything up to standard firewalls and security, which gets worked around or broken about once a month, even if you can keep up to date with the patches, which is damn near impossible." He saw Dr. Georges glance at Mrs. Sheng behind him. "So would you say, then, that the only way to access the main bank is to physically be there?" Well, yes, Daniel said. That's how it's set up. Dr. Georges looked down at the black folder in front of her. She flipped it open and scrolled through a few pages before she found what she was looking for. Mr. Rodriguez, I have here the medical reports from San Francisco State Hospital, where you were admitted after the accident. There was the briefest pause before the word, as though she was resisting dropping air quotes around it. It makes no mention of any injuries to your face, head, or wrists. Could you explain, please? I fell down the stairs, Daniel blurted automatically. And yet here, Dr. Georges continued, I have a peacekeeper report from last night. It says several patrol cars were dispatched to your apartment along with an ambulance over a report of a mugging and a death threat. She looked up at Daniel, who did not dodge her gaze in time. Could you explain, please? I don't see what this has to do with... Could you explain, please? She repeated, enunciating clearly. Daniel felt the shaking start to come back. He had a sudden conviction that these two women were not from health and safety at all. I was walking home from 8th Street, he said, his voice shaking. A couple of guys jumped me. That will do. She made a note. Daniel craned his head to look, despite himself. On the screen she had scribbled, unrelated incident. Now, tell me about Suzanne King. The change in subject nearly gave Daniel whiplash. What do you want to know? Does she often send you to the main bank? More than anyone else, I guess, but that's probably just because I'm new here and I don't have my own project that's more important or anything. I see. And does she treat you well? No, Daniel blurted, before he could stop himself. The urge to put his hands over his mouth was almost irresistible. I mean, she's kind of sharp sometimes, and she isn't friendly or anything, but she's not, like, horrible. I mean, she's not a slave driver or anything. You sound nervous, Mr. Rodriguez. Is it possible that Suzanne King threatened to fire you if you did not represent her well? No! Daniel cried. No, not at all. She said she was very sorry about what happened, and she made sure I got paid leave and everything. She's been very understanding about the whole thing. Would you say you enjoy having Suzanne King as your supervisor? Daniel paused, then deflated. Well, no, he admitted. I'm always scared of losing my job over the smallest little mistake, and I always have to go down into the tangle, which I hate because it scares the living daylights out of me, and for good reason, apparently. How long have you been working at the NDC, Mr. Rodriguez? A little over a year, he said. They hired me right out of college. She made a note. And has Suzanne King been your supervisor for that entire time? Mostly, Daniel said. For the first couple of months I was working under Bobby Jensen, the new hire supervisor. I got promoted up here after that. When was the first time you were sent to work in the main bank? I don't know, it was probably like 6 months ago? So it was under Suzanne King. Well, yes. I mean, they don't send new hires to the Tangle, the main bank. I mean, because it's too sensitive. I mean, if you mess something up, there goes the whole weather system. He looked up at Dr. Georges, eyes narrowed, brows furrowed. What are you getting at? Have you ever been involved in an incident in the main bank before? She asked, ignoring his question. No, I haven't. He took an intense interest in the peace lilies in the corner. They were plastic, but still more natural and comforting than Dr. Georges's eyes. Are you aware, Mr. Rodriguez, of how many life-threatening incidents have occurred in the main bank here in the last 10 years? Daniel stumbled, caught off balance. No, he admitted. 20, she said. He looked up at her, horrified, and was struck with that green laser gaze again. 20 accidents in the last 10 years. 6 of them in the last 5 years, and now 2 in as many months. Do you know how many people have died due to these accidents? Daniel shook his head mutely. 18, she said. Her voice was weirdly devoid of emotion. A third of which occurred just over 2 months ago. Do you know, Mr. Rodriguez, how long Suzanne King has been supervisor of this floor? No. 10 years. Do you want to know how many life-threatening accidents there were in the 30 years between the construction of the main bank and Suzanne King's promotion to department head? She didn't wait for an answer. 7, one of which resulted in an actual death. She closed the folder with a snap of magnetic clasps. It is my job, Mr. Rodriguez, to ensure that government employees are not risking their lives when they should not be. It is my job to ensure that proper precautions are being taken. It is evident that they are not. Good afternoon, Mr. Rodriguez. Hang on a second! Daniel cried. He found himself suddenly on his feet. None of this is Suzanne's fault. It's just not. She doesn't supervise the main bank, just the people who go down to work on it. Anything that happens down there is on systems engineering. They're on the 4th floor if you're having trouble finding them. Stuff that goes wrong is on them, not on Suzanne. She sends me down there because I'm the best at working with the system and because I don't lodge stupid, pointless complaints about it like everyone else on this floor, because I'm here to do a job and I'm damn well going to do it. It's not Suzanne's fault there was a nitrogen fill, and it's not her fault I was down there when it happened. It could have been anybody. It could have been no one. God damn, her job's hard enough without you crazy people coming in here and accusing her of manslaughter. Dr. Georges was regarding him coolly. We'll take that into account, Mr. Rodriguez. Thank you for your time. She better not get fired over this, Daniel grumbled, and stalked out of the office. When he walked out, he was arrested by the sight of every single one of his co-workers staring at him. What are you looking at? He demanded. Azra got slowly to her feet. That, she said softly, was incredible. And astoundingly, she started applauding. The rest of the room picked it up in an instant. Daniel stood, bombarded by praise, his head ringing. He suddenly felt very light-headed. Stop it, guys, he said mildly, stunned. Brian sauntered over to him and threw an arm around his shoulder. Okay, everybody sit down and shut up. The guy's been through enough. He turned to Daniel. I'm buying you a drink, by the way. Don't argue. Daniel shrugged out of his grasp. No, you're not, he said. I just want to do work like normal, Brian, he said, and was shocked to find a sincere note of pleading in his voice. I just want everything to go back to normal. Brian stood back, blinking like a flashbulb had just gone off in his face. Oh. Okay. Sorry, man. No worries. You take care of yourself, all right? Thanks, Brian, he said, and, keeping his eyes fixed on the floor to avoid the stairs, hunched back to his desk, where he cocooned himself in bad code and music turned up too loud. He ignored Azra when she tried to get his attention. He ignored everything he could about the outside world, and much of his own inside world, too. He managed to lose himself in the coding, eventually, and stayed long after most of the rest of the office had left. Sometime around 9 p.m., Brian walked over to his workspace, rolled Azra's chair over, and sat down, staring intently at Daniel. With a sigh, Daniel took out his earbuds. What is it, Brian? He said tiredly. I missed you, dude, he said quietly. Daniel continued to stare mutely at his code. Like, this whole thing seriously scared the hell out of me. I just got to thinking, like, who the hell was I going to get drinks with on Saturdays with the gang? Who the hell was I going to send screenshots of my code to because I named a variable butt-ass and nobody caught it before it got published? Who the hell was going to drag me to lunch and tell me to get some damn sleep when I'd accidentally been coding for 30 hours straight? Who the hell was going to tell me to fuck off, if not you? He shook his head and sighed. I really fucking missed you, man. And you walk in here looking like that, and it's just... His voice was growing choked. When's it gonna stop? The keepers are after the guys who did this, Daniel said, gesturing to himself in general. You mean the stairs? Daniel snorted. Okay, yeah, I deserved that one. So, you gonna tell me what really happened? Daniel chewed his lip. Eventually, he said. Just not right now. It's cool, said Brian. You've probably had to tell the story like 60 times by now. It felt like it. But he had the sudden impulse to tell Brian everything. About his snooping into Project 9441, about the conspiracy club, about his kidnappers and everything they'd dragged out of him. Instead, he sighed, saved his code, and logged out. I'm gonna head home. You done here? He said. Yeah, Brian said, then admitted, I've actually been looking at the videos of moon colonists falling on their faces for like the last 3 hours, waiting for you to leave. He shrugged. Then I got tired of waiting. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Are there a lot of videos of lunars falling on their asses? Brian grinned, not entirely devoid of sincerity. More than you would imagine, he said. Apparently the gravity change is rough on them, especially the new guys. You can always hear their buddies laughing their asses off in the background. We really gotta take that trip up there sometime, Daniel said, getting his stuff together and heading for the elevator. Brian followed him. Yeah, the post-graduation space trip kinda fell through, Brian admitted. But I guess getting a job right out of the gate was worth it. The elevator arrived, and they stepped in. It descended smoothly, almost without a sound. So, what kind of questions did they ask you? I didn't hear anything except for your Suzanne King for President speech. Daniel blushed. I don't know, man. They were seriously grilling me. It seemed like they were looking for an excuse to fire her. And I mean, don't get me wrong, she's awful, but it just didn't seem right, that's all. If she's gonna get fired, it should be for being a dick to her employees, not for this shit that wasn't her fault. Besides, she's only human. Brian tapped the side of his nose. You think that, but they say she's had an artificial heart since she was 16. Daniel raised an eyebrow. What the hell does that have to do with anything? Robot heart, Brian said. Robot soul. Beep boop. No feelings. He snorted. You're weird, he accused. Brian bowed. Thank you, I'll be here all week. Be here a hell of a lot longer than that, Daniel told him, unless you get on somebody's bad side. Shrugging, Brian replied, whatever, I could be a scientist. They always need rocket scientists. Yeah, it's not rocket science. Brian cast him a withering glare, and then they both laughed. Hey, why haven't we gotten to heavy stance yet? Daniel wondered aloud, and glanced up at the floor number. The counter had stopped at 4F. The hell? Said Brian, pushing the button again. It stayed lit up, but the elevator did not move. Daniel wondered how long it had been stopped without them noticing. I swear to God, Daniel, if your bad mojo is about to get me killed, I will never forgive you. I swear to God, Brian, if my bad mojo gets either of us killed, I'm gonna kill somebody. There's a flaw in your plan, Brian pointed out. He spammed the door open button. Christ, we're gonna have to pry our way out of here at this rate. Dude, this is why they have an emergency call button, Daniel said, although his heart was racing and his palms were sweating. He could feel the shaking coming back and tried to fight it down. He pressed the red button with the bell decal next to it. Nothing happened. Oh, fuck, dude, Brian said, his voice cracking. This is bad. We're gonna be fucking stuck in here all night. Take out your bendy straw and suck it up, Daniel snapped. His voice was shaking now, but he had to keep it together, had to get out of this damn elevator before he suffocated. The walls were too close. He had to get out, had to make a bid for freedom now while he could still think straight, before he collapsed into a quivering wreck on the floor. Now help me pull the door open. You take that side. He managed to wedge his fingers into the crack between the panels of the door, while Brian did the same, orienting his body in the opposite direction. All right, on 3. 1, 2, 3! They heaved. The crack between the doors widened, slowly at first, and then, with a squeal, the doors slid reluctantly open. Brian and Daniel fell back against the walls of the elevator, panting. I swear to God, Daniel said, if somebody is standing outside the door with a gun, I will kick it right up their ass. No guns, Daniel. A sarcastic and familiar voice answered from outside. Daniel nearly jumped out of his skin. But I'd appreciate it if you didn't kick this laptop up my ass either. Dylan would be very displeased. And confused. Daniel stared out in absolute slack-jawed amazement. Alan? He said. The pale man bowed elegantly. The one and only. What the hell are you doing here? Proving a point, Alan answered. Also, you can't go home. I think that'll do it for now. I've been reading for way too long, and my foot is asleep. Ah, God. It's so asleep. Ow. Oh, God. Okay. I wasn't gonna do an outro, but there are no stopping places. I seriously there hasn't been a break this whole time. So, yep, there you have it. Yay, more sci-fi story. Maybe this will hold you for quite some time because it's a long-ass video. Good God. Bye!